Me name is Lawson. 36 years old, senior financial analyst at Sterling Capital Partners. Sitting in a conference room with 11 other men. We just walked out of a mandatory training session. Together. All of us. Every male employee in the department. Left our seats, stood up and walked out. Didn't plan it exactly. But when Kent stood up first, and Boyd followed, and then I followed, something clicked. We all just knew. This wasn't happening. Not today, not ever. We weren't going to sit in a circle and share our deepest fears with coworkers, cry about our childhood traumas, expose our insecurities for corporate bonding. That's not what we signed up for. That's not what work is supposed to be. Now we're in the small conference room, the one we use for private calls, looking at each other, half expecting to get fired, half feeling like we just won something. Kent breaks the silence, says, "Well, that happened." Boyd laughs nervously. I say, "Yeah, it did. Now we figure out what comes next." But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a corporate finance firm tried to turn grown men into therapy patients and learn that some boundaries exist for good reasons. I joined Sterling Capital 8 years ago, straight out of my MBA program. Good firm, solid reputation. We manage investments, retirement funds, corporate accounts. About 90 employees total. Finance is a specific culture. Numbers focused, results oriented, professional. You're judged by your work, not your personality. Not by how well you share feelings, by how well you perform. I liked that clarity. Do your job well, get ahead. Do your job poorly, don't. Simple. No games, no politics, just results. The team was mostly men, about 70-30 split. Not because of discrimination. Just how the applicant pool shook out. Finance attracts certain personalities. Analytical, reserved, competitive. More men applied, more men got hired. The women who worked here fit the same mold. Professional, focused, not big on emotional displays. We all spoke the same language. Numbers, deadlines, deliverables. Worked well for years. Then Vivian became our department manager. 42 years old, transferred from another division. Good track record in operations. But different background, different style. First month she observed and learned. Sat in on meetings, reviewed processes. Seemed competent, asked good questions. I figured she'd be fine. Second month, she started talking about team dynamics. Posted articles in Slack about psychological safety, emotional intelligence in the workplace, the importance of authentic connection. I skimmed them and moved on. Corporate buzzwords come and go. Didn't think it would affect actual work. Third month, she announced the initiative. Mandatory vulnerability and connection workshop. 4 sessions over 2 months. All department employees required to attend. Led by an external facilitator named Autumn, who specialized in workplace emotional wellness. The goal was creating deeper team bonds, moving beyond transactional relationships, building authentic human connections. That would improve collaboration and trust. I read the email and felt my stomach tighten. This didn't sound like professional development. This sounded like group therapy, mandatory group therapy, with my coworkers. First session happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Conference room set up differently than usual. Chairs in a circle, no tables. Soft music playing. Tissues strategically placed. Autumn stood in the center. Warm smile, flowy clothes, gentle voice. The opposite of everyone else in the room. 23 employees sitting stiffly in chairs. Suits and ties in a therapy circle. The dissonance was almost funny. Autumn introduced herself. Said she was honored to guide us on this journey toward deeper connection and authentic selves. She asked us to close our eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel our bodies in the chairs. Let go of the workday stress. I opened one eye and looked around. Every man in the room had the same expression. Barely concealed horror. The women looked slightly more comfortable, but not by much. First exercise was sharing something personal, not work-related, something about ourselves that colleagues might not know. A fear, a struggle, an insecurity, to build trust through vulnerability. Autumn went first as an example. Shared that she struggled with imposter syndrome. Sometimes felt like she didn't deserve her success. It took courage to admit that, she said. And courage breeds connection. Then she turned to the circle. Who would like to go first? Silence. Complete silence. 23 adults staring at the floor. Or the ceiling. Or their phones. Anywhere but at each other. Vivian jumped in. Said she'd share. Talked about her fear of failure. How she sometimes worried she wasn't good enough. Autumn praised her bravery. Said that's exactly the kind of sharing we needed. More silence from everyone else. Autumn started going around the circle, calling on people directly. A woman named Marlene shared something generic about work-life balance challenges. Safe, professional, non-revealing. Perfect corporate vulnerability. Then Autumn called on Boyd. Younger guy, been here 3 years. Good analyst, a bit eager to please. He looked trapped. Stammered for a moment. Then shared something real. Said he'd been struggling with anxiety lately. Work pressure getting to him. Sometimes felt like he couldn't breathe. The room went very quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. Uncomfortable quiet. Boyd looked immediately like he regretted it. His face went red. Autumn praised his courage. Said that kind of honesty was exactly what builds connection. But I saw how people looked at Boyd after. Differently. The guy who admitted he had anxiety. The guy who couldn't handle pressure. In finance, where handling pressure is the job. He just painted a target on himself. Session continued with more foresharing. Some people gave corporate non-answers. Others shared small things. The men mostly deflected. Made jokes to avoid real vulnerability. But the precedent had been set. This was what we'd be doing. For 3 more sessions. After the session, I found Boyd in the break room. Asked how he was doing. He looked shaken. Said he didn't know why he shared that. Felt pressured. Didn't want to seem uncooperative. Now he couldn't take it back. Everyone knew he had anxiety. His manager knew. The information was out there. He asked if I thought it would hurt his career. I didn't know what to say. Probably not, I offered weakly. But we both knew the truth. In a competitive environment, admitting weakness had consequences. Perception mattered. He just changed how people perceived him. Not through his work. Through forced confession. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. This wasn't professional development. This was emotional extraction. Forcing people to share private struggles. In front of colleagues and managers. Information that could be used against them. Judgments that couldn't be undone. All in the name of connection. But connection can't be forced. Trust has to be earned. Through working together. Through proving reliability over time. Not through sitting in a circle. And exposing your soft spots. To people who might be competing with you. For the next promotion. Week later I had lunch with Kent. Senior guy, been at Sterling 15 years. Solid, respected, keeps to himself. He brought up the vulnerability session. Said he'd never been so uncomfortable in his life. 47 years old. 2 kids, a mortgage, aging parents. Real problems, real stresses. None of which he wanted to share. With people he worked with. Work was his escape from that stuff. The place where he could focus on problems he could solve. Numbers, deadlines, deliverables. Now they wanted him to bring his problems to work. Perform emotional distress for coworkers. He wasn't going to do it. I said I felt the same way. We started talking to other men. Quietly, privately. Found out we weren't alone. Almost every guy had the same reaction. This felt invasive. This felt wrong. This wasn't what they signed up for. A few had already decided to skip future sessions. Claimed scheduling conflicts, client calls. Anything to avoid sitting in that circle again. Second session came. Attendance was required, Vivian emphasized. But 3 men had conflicts. Mysterious conflicts that came up last minute. The rest of us showed up. Autumn had new exercises. Pair up with someone you don't know well. Share a time you failed. And how it made you feel. I got paired with a woman from accounting. Nice enough person. We'd never really talked. She shared a story about a presentation that went badly. Felt embarrassed. Learned from it. Professional. Appropriate. My turn. I talked about a deal that fell through early in my career. Client backed out last minute. I felt disappointed but moved on. Autumn overheard and pushed deeper. But how did it really make you feel, Lawson? Underneath the professional response. What emotions came up? I said I felt frustrated. She pushed more. Any shame? Any fear? Any deeper feelings? I felt myself getting angry. Said no, just frustrated. Dealt with it, moved on. She nodded but looked unsatisfied. Like I'd failed the assignment by not producing enough emotional content. After that session, I found Boyd again. He looked worse than before. Said people had been treating him differently. His manager asked if he needed reduced workload. Because of his anxiety. He didn't want reduced workload. He wanted to do his job. Now he was being handled, treated as fragile. Because he'd been honest. In a setting that demanded honesty. Then used it against him. That was the moment I decided. This had to stop. Third session was scheduled for the following week. I talked to Kent first. Said I wasn't going. He said he'd already decided the same. We talked to the other men, one by one, privately. Asked how they felt about the training. Every single one expressed discomfort. Some were planning to skip anyway. Others felt trapped, thought attendance was mandatory. We had a quiet meeting. 11 men, small conference room. No women, not because we excluded them. Just happened to be who was most vocal. We discussed options. Could complain to HR.
Could talk to Vivian.
Could just not show up. Kent suggested we go to the session. All of us. Sit down. And when the sharing started, politely declined to participate. As a group. United front. If they fired all of us, they'd have a bigger problem than uncomfortable training sessions. We agreed. Session 3 arrived. We all showed up on time. Sat in the circle. Autumn smiled and welcomed us. Started with a breathing exercise. Then announced today's activity. Share something you've never told a coworker. Something that keeps you up at night. A secret fear or struggle. Then we'd practice holding space for each other. Whatever that meant. She asked for volunteers. Silence. She started to call on someone. Kent spoke up first. Said, "Excuse me, Autumn. Before we continue, some of us have concerns about this format." Autumn looked surprised. Asked Kent to share those concerns. With vulnerability, of course.
Kent ignored the jab.
Said, "We're professionals. We're here to do a job. Our personal fears and struggles are not relevant to that job, and frankly, not appropriate to share in a work setting with colleagues and managers who will form impressions that affect our careers." Autumn started to respond, but Boyd stood up. Surprised everyone, including himself. Said, "I shared something personal in session 1 about my anxiety. Since then I've been treated differently. Like I'm fragile, like I can't handle things. That one moment of honesty has changed how people see me. That's not connection. That's consequence." More men started speaking, each expressing similar concerns. Professional boundaries existed for reasons. Work wasn't therapy. Colleagues weren't friends by default. Trust was earned, not extracted. I stood up and added my piece. Said vulnerability with people you trust is healthy. Forced vulnerability with coworkers is not. We're not refusing to connect. We're refusing to perform emotional intimacy with people we barely know, in a setting where information has power and can be used against us. Vivian tried to intervene. Said this was exactly the resistance the training was meant to address. Men avoiding emotions, hiding behind professionalism.
Kent responded calmly.
Said with respect, Vivian. Not wanting to share my fears with coworkers. Isn't hiding. It's boundaries. Healthy boundaries. That separate work life from personal life. You wouldn't ask us to share our medical records, our financial situations, our relationship problems. Why is sharing our deepest fears any different? Vivian didn't have a good answer. Autumn tried to salvage the session. Said perhaps we could modify the exercises. Make them less intense.
Kent shook his head.
Said we appreciate the offer, but we're not participating in this format. Period. He stood up, looked at the rest of us, and walked toward the door. One by one we followed. Boyd, then me, then 9 others. 11 men walking out, leaving Vivian and Autumn, with the remaining employees, mostly women, looking shocked. That's how we ended up in the small conference room, waiting to see what would happen. The fallout was immediate. Vivian reported us to HR. Glenda, the HR director, called meetings, individual meetings with each man, asked why we refused to participate. I explained my reasoning clearly. Professional boundaries. Concerns about information being used against us. The Boyd situation as evidence. Glenda listened but looked conflicted. Said the training was designed to help, not to harm. I said intentions don't matter if outcomes are harmful. Boyd was harmed. His honest sharing changed how he was treated. That's not connection. That's consequence. She said she'd review the situation. Week of tension followed. The department was divided. Men on one side, mostly women on the other. Though not entirely. Marlene approached me quietly. Said she understood why we walked out. She didn't love the training either. Just felt more pressure to comply. Said some of the women were also uncomfortable, but didn't feel safe refusing. That was interesting. The training meant to create safety had actually created pressure to conform. For everyone. Men responded by opting out. Women responded by going along. Neither was genuine engagement. Both were responses to coercion. Vivian tried to salvage her initiative. Posted in Slack about the importance of emotional courage. How resistance to vulnerability was itself a problem. How some people were letting the team down. The passive aggression was thick. We didn't respond publicly. Just kept doing our jobs. Delivering results. Proving our value through work, not through emotional performance. 2 weeks later, Sterling himself got involved. The CEO, 70 years old, built the company from nothing. Old school, results-focused, no nonsense. He'd been hearing about the situation. Called a meeting with Vivian, Glenda, Kent, and me. Sterling asked what was going on. Vivian explained her training initiative, how it was designed to build deeper connections. How some employees had refused to participate, were undermining team development. Sterling asked how productivity had been since the started. Vivian admitted there had been some tensions, but that was normal during transformation. Sterling asked me for my perspective. I explained our concerns, professional boundaries, information used against vulnerable employees, the Boyd situation specifically. I said we weren't against connection. We were against forced emotional exposure. With people who weren't our therapists or close friends. Work could be collaborative and respectful, without being a therapy group. Sterling nodded slowly. Asked Vivian one question. Before this training, were there team problems, collaboration issues, trust deficits, actual problems this was solving? Vivian hesitated. Said it was preventive. Building resilience before problems emerged. Sterling said, so there weren't actual problems. Vivian admitted no major issues. Just opportunities for deeper connection. Sterling turned to me. Asked if the men who walked out were good employees. I said yes, some of our best. Kent had 15 years of excellent performance. I had 8. The others were solid contributors. None had performance issues. Sterling sat back. Said, let me understand. You implemented mandatory emotional training For a team that was functioning well, some employees had reasonable objections about professional boundaries, and you escalated to HR because they didn't want to share their fears. With coworkers, Vivian started to defend herself. Sterling raised a hand, said, "I built this company on work, on results, on people doing their jobs well, not on how good they are at sharing feelings. If someone does excellent work, I don't need to know their fears. I need to know their spreadsheets." He turned to Glenda, said, "Cancel the remaining sessions. Make any future emotional wellness programming optional, strictly optional, and make it clear that non-participation has no career consequences." Vivian looked devastated. Her initiative was dead. "Sterling wasn't finished," said Vivian. "Your intentions were good, but execution matters. You made people uncomfortable, then punished them for setting boundaries. That's not leadership. That's coercion." With a wellness label, meeting ended. The training was officially canceled. Attendance became voluntary. Almost nobody volunteered. The fourth session happened with Autumn and Vivian, and maybe 5 people who felt obligated. Not a success story. Vivian was quietly moved to a different role. 3 months later, not fired, but reassigned, managing processes instead of people, where her analytical skills were useful, and her emotional engineering tendencies were contained. New manager was a guy named Hollis. Old school like Sterling. His philosophy was simple. Do your job well, treat people professionally. Keep personal stuff personal. Nobody's business but yours. The relief was palpable. Boyd recovered somewhat. Took a while for the anxiety label to fade, but his work spoke for itself. Eventually people remembered he was good at his job and forgot about his vulnerable moment. Mostly, the department healed. Collaboration returned. Without forced vulnerability circles, we connected through working together, solving problems, celebrating wins. The organic way trust is actually built. Year later, Kent retired. Through a small party, shared some stories. That night, he was more open than I'd ever seen, because it was his choice, his timing, with people he'd come to trust. Over 15 years of working together. That's what real vulnerability looks like. Earned, not extracted. Chosen, not coerced. I got promoted to lead analyst, based on my work, not on how well I performed emotions. Sterling congratulated me personally. Said he respected how I'd handled the situation, standing up for boundaries while staying professional. Said that was leadership, not forcing people to cry together. I think about the training sometimes, what it was trying to do, and why it failed so badly. Vivian wanted connection. That's not wrong. Teams do need trust. Collaboration does need relationships. But you can't mandate feelings. Can't force intimacy on a schedule. Can't extract vulnerability and call it bonding. Real connection happens naturally, through shared work, shared challenges, shared wins, through proving yourself reliable. Over time, through choosing to open up, when you're ready, to people you've learned to trust. Not strangers in a circle, demanding your fears, for a corporate exercise. My daughter started her first job recently. Asked me about team-building activities. I told her there's a difference between activities that build teams and activities that perform connection. Real bonding happens through work, through struggle, through success, through being there when it matters. If someone wants your vulnerability, they should earn it first, by being trustworthy, not demand it, because a facilitator said so. She said that made sense. More sense than the emotional intelligence module her company was pushing. I told her to trust her instincts. If something feels invasive, it probably is. Professional boundaries exist for good reasons. Protecting them isn't cold. It's healthy. Anyway, that's the story of how 11 men walked out of mandatory vulnerability training because we didn't want to share our deepest fears with people we worked with. Who might use that information against us, consciously or not? We weren't cold. We weren't emotionally stunted. We just understood that work isn't therapy, colleagues aren't therapists, and forced intimacy isn't connection. It's performance, with potential consequences. The company learned that boundaries matter, that trust is earned, not demanded, that good employees don't need to cry together, to work well together. They just need mutual respect, clear expectations, and the freedom to keep personal stuff personal. Vulnerability is powerful.